Welcome to an interview with Clear Mountain. Tan Ajahn Asoko, it's so good to have you on. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, a brief introduction. Tan Ajahn Asoko grew up in a village near Geneva in Switzerland. His mother brought Buddhism into the family life. As a teenager, he visited Amaravati Monastery, where he first met Luang Por Sumedho and was fortuitously able to attend a 10-day retreat with Luang Por Sucitto. At 19 years old, he decided to take a sabbatical year off and spend it at Wat Nanachat, Luang Por Chah's branch monastery for Westerners in Thailand, under the guidance of Luang Por Pasanno. After 9 years back in lay life, it seemed time to return to Thailand, and he was ordained as a bhikkhu by Luang Por Liem. He spent 18 years in Thailand, the last 8 years as Luang Por Sumedho's attendant and secretary, what we call upatthak. He came to stay at Amaravati Monastery in January 2021 as Luang Por Sumedho returned to live there. So, Tan Ajahn, we've wanted to have you on for a long time to speak about this and other insights into Dhamma, and just thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for
Sorry. So first question, Tan Ajahn, can you just tell us how you came to be Luang Por Sumedho's upatthak and where that role has taken you these past near decade?
Oh, last question, the second one. Well, he basically asked me. So I remember as a junior monk, every time he would visit Thailand when he was still the abbot of Amaravati, somehow, I think just about most of his visits, I had the good fortune of being one of the two monks attending to him. Not that I specifically asked for the opportunity, but they always ask for volunteers, and I always got a chance. And then once he retired, he came to Thailand, and one day our paths met. He was visiting Wat Nanachat. I was passing through, wandering during my Majjhima years, and he invited me to come and spend the Vasa in Wat Paratanawan with him. And as I hadn't made any other commitments, I had plans, but no commitments, so I just went with the flow. And at Ratanawan, I started helping look after him with the rest of the Sangha, and very quickly he asked me if I'd be his secretary and then look after his, help him with his health as he was heading into his 80s, travel with him, and then I just became the factotum.
Mm. Sometimes in our monasteries, we end up using some Buddhist hybrid English, and it's possible, probably likely, that a lot of people actually won't know this word Upaṭṭhāking. Could you just explain what is an upatthak and what do they do? I think we oftentimes just use the Pali/Thai word when we're talking about the role, but some people who haven't been in monasteries won't know it.
Usually in English, I just use the word attendant, because it covers the basis. You basically attend to the needs of a senior monk. So in our tradition, going right back to the Buddha's time, he had a position where he was involved in a lot of teaching, and he needed someone to help him attend to other duties that he didn't necessarily have the time to attend to himself. And so that could involve anything as helping cleaning the dwelling, helping arrange some necessities that they don't have time to look out for themselves, soap bars and toothpaste and toothbrushes, to doing the laundry. And then also, as we go through our monastic life, sometimes we need someone at our side just to help out. So what the term upatthak means is basically someone there to help out. Attendant. And then that, depending on the relationship with a senior monk or the monk that we're helping, that can grow and morph into different roles. There's some people like Luang Por Liem or some of the senior Thai teachers who often have a group of 2 or more monks tagging along after them, helping with various duties, and they kind of share the roles. And it very much depends on the character of the senior monk. Some people are comfortable with that, other people are more private, and they prefer having a single attendant. We have examples like Luang Por Liem himself, or Ajahn Pasanno is a very good example as well of someone who would make himself available to train junior monks in this role. So giving the opportunity for someone to do that for 2 weeks help teach them how to do it. And then 2 weeks later, someone else gets a chance. And it can be an opportunity for people to have time a bit closer to the teacher, spending a bit more time together in a different setting than just the general community setting. And the senior monks also take the opportunity to teach these skills to more junior monks, which come in handy because then when very respected elders visit the community, then the monks in the community know how to look after them, how to help them with whatever needs they are. And these are always, it's always helpful as a senior monk, and it's always a golden opportunity as a junior monk to be close to revered elders. So with Luang Por Sumedho, maybe he did that in his early days as an abbot and as a teacher, but as time went on, already when he was here at Amaravati, he would usually have an attendant for 6 months, up to a year and a half before he would change. That was his preference. So when we started looking after him at Wat Paratanawan, we had a 2-week on, 2-week off rotation system. And after a while, he kind of shyly communicated the fact that he wouldn't mind if it lasted longer than that. So we did a 1-month rotation. And then by the time he asked me to be his secretary, do secretarial duties on top of other things I was helping with, I had taken the measure of his preference and characters and sort of asked him also, given how elderly he was, it seemed unreasonable for us as a community to ask him to adapt to our wishes and needs. It seemed more beautiful and gracious for us to adapt to his preferences. And he clearly stated he preferred sticking with one person for a longer period of time. And it's been 13 years going. And I feel very fortunate that he hasn't fired me, that I haven't run away. Something's working.
It really is fascinating. I was quite surprised, and I was unexpected to find that it's an art form. When you go to Thailand and you see the degree of skill and attentiveness which the upatthak pays towards the teacher, the elder that they're attending to, and recently learned that the word upatthak, literally standing near, and it's the same root, ta, as satipatthana, so that which pays attention to. And I've sometimes heard about this upatthak role as, rather than taking the breath as your object of meditation or a mantra, you're actually taking your teacher as your object of meditation, your object of satipatthana. And I'm curious if you could talk to that. It's a big question, but have you ever framed it like that, or is that just obviously what it's like?
Well, if you really put your heart into it, it's what it becomes. But I heard that when I was a novice, when we were doing Vinaya classes in Wat Nanachat, and Ajahn Asoko put it that way as well. And I guess it depends on your kind of character and nature, but I'm both inclined to using the in and out breath as a basic home-based meditation object, but I'm also quite inclined to service. So the metaphor made sense to me. I didn't know I'm anything but a Pali scholar, so I was not aware of the etymological root of upatthak, but it's very beautiful and it makes sense. But in practical terms, it really is giving oneself to the breath as an object of meditation, being willing to put down distractions in order to allow the attention to settle with the in and out breath is a very similar process to the willingness to serve someone who needs help. And then in order to do that appropriately, the willingness to put aside the in and out breath, consider the needs of so the process is the same. And it makes sense to consider then one's teacher or the elder that one's looking after, make him the object of meditation. Most of the time, these relationships are nourishing because the teacher is inspiring, has a lot of experience, has a lot of insights and wisdom to share. And so when one holds in one's mind such a person, it has a beneficial effect on the mind. good friendship in Dhamma, what we call Kalyanamitta. And it fulfills this form of meditation that the Buddha recommended, Sangha, recollection of Sangha, so to recall an elder. But it's also a very good it's a very good object of meditation, just across the board, because one gets to spend time with the notion, whether it's the breath or the teacher, we spend time with something that takes us away from distractions, that takes us away from self and all the preoccupations of self, which somehow are always turning into a black hole. So in that way, it's very useful. And then it allows one to really bring a lot of good things to this relationship of looking after someone. So I find myself doing that every day when I'm with Luang Por. And more recently, I've been paying a bit more attention to, in my own kind of rhythms, how Luang Por's needs might be changing. He's now into his 10th decade. He's become a nonagenarian a year ago, and I need to consider very regularly where his energies are at, where his health are at, and I ask myself, is he getting enough food and nutriments and stuff? What is enough? What is not enough? What is too much? In terms of activities, he naturally enjoys interactions, and for all of us human beings, interacting with our fellow humans is nourishing, especially for Luang Por around Dhamma. And but how much can he do? How much does he have the energy to do? What is too much? What is not enough? What is just the right amount? In terms of exercise, an old body does not want to move, does not want to limber about, and yet it's needed, otherwise it'll degenerate faster. So there's so many aspects of looking after him that need kind of careful attention. And my own relationship to him, kind of I've inquired regularly over the years, asking in one way or another if he wants he wants a different face in front of him sometimes, if he's getting tired of me, or trying to bring in other people who might kind of stimulate him in a different way, kind of speak with him, address him, listen to him in a different way. So kind of always keeping an eye out for what's appropriate, and there is no given moment where you find a final answer to that. So using one's teacher as a meditation object kind of brings us to consider these things carefully. And it puts one at if that's my focus, is looking after Luang Por, and then I get the chance to find a balance between how much time and how am I using my time, and how much time am I devoting to what we call my practice, making sure there's enough solitude, making sure there's enough time to sit and walk, there's enough time to watch this body and this mind, where they're at, how they settle, guiding it along the Eightfold Path. But then at the same time, how much time do I spend considering him and his needs, and if one attendant is enough, or do I need to bring in more people? Is one more enough, or at what point and you get to review things that have happened in the past. Did they work well? What were the results? Can we do that again, or does something need to be changed? And then I get to think down the road as well, what may be coming up in terms of needs, and how to prepare to address them properly. So it's a very rich kind of environment in which to develop a lot of good Dhamma qualities.
Tan Ajahn, I think you're also what we refer to in our more common parlance as a upatthak, and
As in like super, not like soup.
it's true. And I think people are not necessarily aware just of the amount of detail the Vinaya, our monastic code, goes into in terms of exactly just the depth of care that an upatthak gives to an elder. And it's one of the more profound shifts you see when, young men step into this role and suddenly have to really do something pretty foreign to our culture and put aside themselves again and again and again and truly attend to the needs of another. I'm curious if you have just maybe any thoughts for, I'm curious to hear about sort of just the details of even a small portion of the day about how you attend to Luang Por Sumedho. If you can lay out some of the small tasks from waking up to the meal, for example, just so people get some idea of the amount of kind of care and detail that goes into this minutia of attending to someone.
Well, that has changed over time, and it keeps changing. So when I started looking after Luang Por, he was still quite independent and able to function by himself. And a lot of the help that I offered, he didn't actually need, but he appreciated. And so I'd go to visit him at his kuti, his dwelling. Kuti being a Pali word also used in our lingo, which means literally a hut, but it's basically our dwelling place. So I'd go to see him at his kuti in the morning. He'd be already awake and sitting in his meditation chair platform, and the lights would be dimmed, and he'd be sitting there maybe for half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, depending on how early he got up. And I'd creep up to him quietly and squat down by the platform and clear my throat gently so that he could hear me. I would kind of reach him through the tranquility of his posture, but without making him jump out of his skin either. And then start the day. And at the beginning, there wasn't that much to do. He made his bed and he kind of took care of things. So I'd basically just have a look around, make him a cup of coffee, turn on the lights, bring him anything he might need. And then I was off on to my alms round. And then after the alms round, I'd usually not need to see him. I'd collect the food for him or prepare the... At the beginning, he was actually coming out every day to the main hall for the meal. So I'd go to invite him over, and we'd walk over, and then he'd have the meal, have to prepare his seat with all the necessities. The alms bowl needs to be prepared according to our Vinaya standards, and carry the bowl to the beginning of the alms round. He would do alms round at the front gate, and invite him to let me carry his bowl for him on the way back. And so they're all the preparations that go with the meal, basically make it as easy as possible for him. So all he has to do is go through the minimum amount of difficulties, and the rest of the time he'd be free either to speak with the next senior monk, usually Ajahn Asoko, or maybe speak with some lay people, and he didn't have to worry about preparing for the meal. That would be the duty of the attendant. And so there are a lot of little details like that would be part of a myriad of tiny little details that we look after in order to take them off his plate, and he's then free to talk with other monks and lay people and share some of his insights, or sometimes just being such a wise person in operating from a place of freedom in his heart. Just even talking about mundane things was sometimes a teaching to people, because they see that he's kind of just radiating joy and happiness no matter what the circumstances are. Good weather, bad weather, happy community, drama in the community, whatever is happening, there's a steadiness there. And so looking after a lot of these little details on the side helps make him available to share that with people. And then after the meal, washing his alms bowl, and accompanying him back to his kuti. And then not very long into this kind of morning routine, people out of deference in Thailand kind of wanted to invite him to sit in a vehicle to come from his kuti to the main sala, and from the main sala to the gates at the front of the monastery, to make it easy for him. But when you reach 80 years old and you make life easy for people, they're very happy to take it, and they get less exercise. And at 80 years old, some measure of exercise is good. So I had to start paying attention to that, speak with him, help him be aware of it, and then see with him how he wanted to play that. Would he like to say no sometimes to that vehicle and just walk, or just say yes and then get on some sort of exercise routine outside of that? And that balance has changed. The number of activities, how much he comes out, all these things have changed a lot over the last 12, 13 years. So now we're here at Amaravati, and he's still able to look after himself in the morning. And I myself and Ajahn Vinita, my fellow upatthak, we come in the morning and prepare for the morning coffee scene, but we wait for him to give us a signal that he's ready for that. And he'll just come out, have coffee, and his eyesight is not so good anymore. His hearing, he uses hearing aid, his balance is sort of slowly getting worse. So he can still walk around with a walking stick, sometimes with a frame, but we need to keep an eye on how he looks. And now he doesn't go arms around anymore. And we try to help him have some sort of moving around, exercise, indoor bicycle, walk around the grounds. Or a day like yesterday when he came out to the temple and gave a talk, as he does every fortnight. So just walking from the kuti to the temple and back is plenty exercise for the day for him, let alone sitting in the temple and producing an hour of output of Dhamma. And it enlivens him in a certain way, and on another side it also tires him, because bodies are bodies, and anybody who talks for a certain amount of time realizes after a while that it uses energy to talk. So the routine has changed over time. And at this point, I cannot say yet that the actual time, physical assistance he needs is anything overwhelming at all, by any means. But I do a lot of reading for him these days, as his eyesight is not so good. And that means reading emails and correspondence, replying, typing emails and letters, writing letters for him, sending mail, and then reading Dhamma. He enjoys listening to Dhamma, whether it's on YouTube, on the iPad, or sometimes just I pick up a book and read to him. He used to be an avid reader most of his life, and as his eyesight started going, I kind of felt sorry for him that he wasn't able to enjoy that pleasure, and I offered to read to him. So I've been doing that, and then the evenings as well, at tea time and after tea time, enjoy reading. And so some days I can read up to 4 hours a day to him. So then I get to take the measure of how much energy that consumes.
That's beautiful. And the sensitivity over time, seeing how one's meditation object changes through the course of years, and being able to subtly shift your own efforts in relationship to it. There's kind of a fascinating and somewhat famous story in the autobiography of Ajahn Lee Damadaro, when he's talking about himself Upaṭṭhāking, being the attendant monk to Luang Por Man, and their huts were right next to each other, or actually there was just a wall between them. And one way that Ajahn Lee trained himself to know what Luang Por Man wanted is he actually poked a hole through the bamboo wall, kind of the walling, so he could look, okay, where is Ajahn Mun putting his, where does he put down his robe, all these other things. And so watching in these subtle ways. And there's another term related to Upaṭṭhāking, which some people call upastalking, where you're kind of overly attendant in a very obvious and somewhat intrusive way. And I'm curious if you can just talk about the balance between being attentive but not overly all up in somebody's business, because it's a skill to be able to pick up the flavor of what someone needs or wants, but not be staring at them all the time, which is annoying. So
You seem to know more terminology around this, like upastalking. Well, the interesting thing with Upaṭṭhāking is that there's so much Dhamma to be developed and learned in the context of Upaṭṭhāking. And it's as good as any activity, really, in terms of living in a community, developing Dhamma. Because one needs to learn to pay attention to details and to, basically develop a bit of an eagle eye and notice things. But as you say, not necessarily in an intrusive way, so developing the sensitivity to where the other person is at. So in the scriptures, in the Vinaya guidelines we have around looking after elders, there's this guideline where they say the attendant puts out at the beginning, when he's learning how to look after an elder, he puts out toothwoods. So they didn't have toothbrush, they had these pieces of wood that they made into something that looks like a toothbrush. And in order to discover what size toothwood the elder likes, you put out 3. You put out a long one, a medium one, and a short one. And then when you've seen which one he likes best, then you know to just put out that one. It's not even as simple as that. Because some elders don't want to use always a short one or always a long one. They want to change. Maybe their needs change. And so one needs to be able to develop an attention to detail and an interest in noticing what the elder is doing. And I learned to do that with Luang Por. And as I was telling you earlier, at the beginning, when I was looking after him, he was still very self-reliant, independent, because he could, but also because generally he's quite a private person. And very little by little, I started offering, Luang Por, do you mind if I help you with this? And he would go, oh, I can do that. And I was like, yes, I'm aware of it. I just want to offer to help with it, so you don't have to bother. And sometimes his answer would be, no, I'll do it myself. And other times he'd kind of, oh, yes, please, go ahead. And little by little, I learned to appreciate what he was comfortable with me doing and what he preferred doing himself. Sometimes I could just give it a try, and there are ways of trying to find out without asking the question openly, but sometimes it is necessary to ask the question openly. But you need to learn to read the situations and kind of have an eye out for what is needed. So one of the earlier things that I didn't have to ask permission for is when I was kind of the background attendant. The very first thing he actually asked me to look after when I met him at Wat Nanachat, right after he invited me to come to spend the rains retreat in Wat Paratanawan, he asked me if I would help him look after his diet, because he enjoys food, as most of us do. And being in the position that he is, a lot of people want to offer him all his favorite foods. All delicious foods happen to usually be sweet, salty, and fatty. And so he was putting on weight, and he finds it difficult to kind of find his way through that maze. And so he asked me to do that. And so I became kind of background. I was always in the background, even though we were changing teams of attendants every 2 weeks, then every month. I was kind of always coming around and having a look, checking in with him about the diet. And then I'd look at the room, and I'd notice that the current team of attendants left his drinking water in this place, but he usually has it in that place. They'd leave all the little things that he uses throughout the day, whether it was in his office, on his desk, in his bedroom, by the bedside, in the bathroom, in the main room, on the shrine. By coming frequently and observing, I learned where he liked to have things, and some attendants paid attention to that and some did not. So I'd go there and just start putting things back in their place where he liked to have them. And he noticed this. And a lot of senior monks who have an attendant looking after him this very quickly will notice whether the attendant is a bit scatterbrained or if he's anchored here and now, paying attention to details. And you learn to have an appreciation for that. I can say that myself now because I've been in robes for 20 years and start having attendants around me, and I notice these things. And so I think that was probably what led Luang Por to ask me to be his secretary and more full-time attendant, because he realized I pay attention and I try to do things the way he prefers them. And but it took me 4 years, a full 4 years, before he allowed me to do just about everything for him, including making his bed for him in the morning and doing all his laundry for him and anything at all. Until the first 4 years were over, there were still areas where his answer sometimes would be, oh, I'll take care of that. But slowly it shifted, and this is something that happens when trust develops in the relationship, and that takes time.
Luang Por Pasanno, I know, is also a very private person, but, you know, allowing oneself to be upatthakt is actually, in many cases, you know, a significant act of sacrifice for some more private individuals, but important in terms of carrying on this tradition and allowing another to come close. For those lay people listening, Tan Ajahn, one opportunity for this upatthak assistant role is with one's parents, and it's, I think, a relationship or a way of relating to one's parents which isn't spoken to as often and as much detail in the West. If you had advice for those listening about just when they go home next, how to upatthak a parent in a way that's beautiful in this sense that really allows the heart to grow, what guidance would you give? Because if people can really bring that to that relationship with the parents, I think it can shift things dramatically in their family life. And curious what advice would you give such people?
But in upatthāking, generally, whether it's a teacher or any senior monk, not necessarily someone that we feel attracted to and respect, but just anyone at all. And even in my years of looking after Luang Por Sumedho, it's not the case that I wake up every morning with a heart full of joy and wanting to do nothing else but serve him 100% until we say goodnight to each other. And that's not the nature of the human mind. The nature of the human mind is that we have desires and moods and feelings and emotions, and they sometimes get in the way. And then in relationships, there are misunderstandings. And out of those misunderstandings, feelings get hurt. We kind of carry resentments and anger and grudges, maybe more so in relationship to family members, because there's just so much history of the nature of those relationships. But what I've discovered in upatthāking, and this was already before I had the good fortune to kind of start being Luang Por Sumedho's attendant, was in offering service, one is doing an act of kindness and an act of goodness. One is offering a gift to another person of something that's helpful, that's kind, that's caring. And there's one particular example that sticks out in my memories. When I was in Wat Papong, there was one monk who was a junior Thera and who is doing a lot of service in the monastery, but he didn't have many social skills, and so not very charismatic. And so generally people were not so attracted to doing something as simple as washing his alms bowl for him after the meal. And I didn't have any particular preferences towards him, so I figured, well, every now and then I'll go and wash his alms bowl for him. Until one day he did something that really, really annoyed me. And then I thought, well, that's it, I'm not washing his bowl anymore. And for about 4 or 5 days, I was camped on that position, and I wouldn't necessarily think about it all day, but at the end of the meal, when I was finished my meal and I had the opportunity to turn around and offer to take a senior monk's alms bowl, I'd always go to someone else. And very quickly I noticed that I was very much following this kind of resentment I had in my heart. And he was washing his own bowl because nobody else was doing it for him. And after 5 days, I just got so disappointed with what came from following that in my heart. This kind of grudge and resentment. It was so unbeautiful, so petty, that I decided I'd go and wash his alms bowl for him, whether he needed it or not, whether he appreciated it or not. The whole point was to do it so that I could get past this obstacle in my own heart. And I went to him and went down on my knees, as we usually do, put my hands in Anjali, and I didn't even have to say anything, and I didn't want to say anything, because this thing was still right there, present in my heart. And I took his alms bowl to wash it, and he gave me the sweetest smile. And that just kind of cleaned everything away. And I was so glad I did that, because it kind of allowed this completely ridiculous pettiness and resentment to just completely vanish. And we find ourselves in in relationships very often stuck with these things, and nobody wants necessarily to hold on to a grudge. Nobody wants to be petty. Nobody kind of wakes up in the morning saying, how about I spend the day feeling self-righteous and telling others they're wrong and I'm right? And yet that's what happens. So looking after people is often an opportunity to show care and love. And sometimes is also an opportunity and a circumstance in which these things will kind of float up to the surface and reveal themselves, most often as a resistance. Oh no, I don't really want to do that for them because I've got history. And so looking after elders in the community or looking after one's parents is very often we perform all kinds of acts of kindness to help each other without realizing we're doing them. And then in terms of this Upaṭṭhāking, or offering these kinds of acts of kindness to others and in relationship to our parents, it's kind of bringing intention to it. Rather than doing it automatically because mom or dad find it difficult to get up and they need something, or we feel like offering them a drink, or it's time for their meal, or then we do it carried by the flow of events without really putting much intention or attention into it other than the need, but to actually pay attention to that and say, okay, if I'm doing this, how can I do this nicely? When I visit my dad, Dad, do you need anything? What can I do for you? Or sometimes I go to him, and Dad is a very nice man and he's affectionate enough, but I wouldn't say he's someone who's very affective, very affectionate physically. I tend to have a lot of that kind of, I like expressing affection like that. So I'll go to him, and at the beginning it felt a bit awkward, but I just rub him on the back. I never did that until in Thailand. There was one senior monk who was sick, and he said, please rub my back. That's what we do in Thailand. I was like, what? And yeah, there you go. And I did it because he asked me. And then I realized this is just such a kind thing to do. It's what mothers do to infants and young children when they're unhappy. They hold them against the shoulder and rub their backs. It's just such a natural gesture of affection. And so I started doing that to my dad, and he'd go, oh, that feels so nice. So now I do it regularly when I visit him. And paying attention to how much in our lives we actually do to help each other out. And then there's something about bringing attention and intention to it and asking ourselves, how can I improve on this? How can I refine it? How can I do a bit more, do a bit differently? And then you step into the realm where you're not just responding to necessity out of kindness, but you're also adding onto it, like, how can I make this a nice interaction? And sometimes it means we have a grudge and we need to be able to put it down. And sometimes we don't, and we say, okay, well, rather than just bringing in mom or dad or grandmother or somebody a cup of tea or something, how about I just take a minute to ask them how their day is, or do they need anything else, or tell them how much we appreciate them. Is there anything else you need? And they're tiny little ways that we can actually improve on the quality of what we're giving by bringing more attention to it, specifically kind attention.
Do you have any other skillful means for that, Tan Ajahn? Like little things which someone could bring to their parents. I know with Luang Por Pasanno, folding really carefully the clothing so it's really beautifully put down, or, like you said, your way of asking Luang Por Sumedho very delicately if you could help with something but without being imposing. Do you have any little, like the Ajahn Asoko tips and tricks? Any more gems?
Well, I don't think it works to give tips and tricks in any kind of detail, because it depends so much on the person. Like with Luang Por Liem, for example, I had the good fortune during my 5th year as a monk of living in Wat Nong Papong. And at the beginning, I was shy to offer to be one of his attendants, because I didn't want to be the big, clumsy Westerner who comes and asks to get in an opportunity when other people are being very shy about and maybe want to do it just as much as I did. So a few months went by when I didn't, and I was just observing. And then eventually nobody signed up on the sheet, so that was my chance. And then it went on for about 3 months. And over those 3 months, I learned that he's someone who won't tell you how to do anything. He'll do it himself. But he's extremely sharp, and he's watching to see how much attention you are paying to the environment. And if he notices that you're paying attention, then he'll start showing you. And you learn from his showing you. But if people are not paying attention, then he won't bother. So I think the most fundamental quality, I guess, that I could point to in terms of upatthāking and helping other people, helping a community, helping a family, helping a relative, a teacher, a friend, is really learning to pay attention to detail, learning how to teach oneself to learn through watching, to learn through noticing, to learn through paying attention, so that as much as possible we can learn without imposing on the other person the need to break into speech and having to tell us, explain to us. That may be necessary and the other person might not mind doing it, but really learning to develop an eye for an intention to learn, an intention to help, and an ability to try to learn without people telling us. And then it's okay to ask. And if the other person wants to answer, they will. And if they're Luang Por Liem, they'll probably go, never mind. But I think if anything is useful, it's that attitude of really trying one's best to learn from observing, from watching. And from that, I think a lot of other stuff kind of comes out naturally, because then you can adapt to the character of the person. Maybe they want help, maybe they don't want help. If they don't like to be helped, then you get to do it without them noticing. You learn how to do it secretly, so to speak. Or if that makes them, if they don't like that, then... But basically learning to what is helpful for the other person, rather than what do I want to do for them. Do they actually want to be helped? And if they are willing to be helped, then try to learn as much as possible from watching and listening and observing.
Yeah, one of the things I was surprised about, I didn't know there was massage in a monastic life. I thought it was just meditating, watching the breath all the time, all day, every day. But it was actually really nurturing to my heart when I took on upatthāking, looking after Luang Por Pasanno. And, we're all, young guys, coming to the monastery, and a lot of us have no massage skills, so... Ajahn Pasanno might we might ask for an opportunity to massage, and we're just like kind of poking him all over, and he's just enduring it. But his willingness to allow us, and sometimes it will be a group of people, offering a group massage, and just the intimacy of that, my heart just really softened, really quite palpably. And I'm curious if there is this general principle of like we become like those who we associate with, especially if you're able to kind of soften, put down all one's guards. And I can't say I'm all that much more like Luang Por Pasanno, but there are opportunities for learning when you really are so physically close to someone. And I'm curious if you have any examples of kind of close teachings that you've gotten from Luang Por Sumedho, just from the proximity effect.
Yeah, I've been reflecting on that, because I was kind of watching, try to understand how I've learned from him, and I realized that over the years I haven't had many questions burning questions that I had to ask him. Luang Por, can I ask you a question? What about anapanasati? What about dependent origination? What color is enlightenment, or stuff like that? But I've been present for so many of his Dhamma talks, question and answer sessions, and for so many of the opportunities that people have had to come and visit him. And I was always, because I was taught to do that, I was always sensitive, trying not to impose. But he's always asking, no, please, I'd like you to be there. Stay nearby me. And realize that as much as we can see teachers as kind of these highly developed beings who are the teachers and who are independent and who have all these amazing abilities, they're also human. And so just sitting with Luang Por Sumedho over so many years, hearing how he teaches Dhamma over and over again, I realize has formatted my way of thinking. So when we develop right view, I mean, you've probably come across this description, and one description of wisdom is kind of we develop wisdom first on a pariyatti level, on a study level. So that's the intellectual level. And learn memorizing basics such as what the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, the four foundations of mindfulness are. And then second level is bringing it into the heart and starting to say, ask oneself, how do these teachings and guidelines, pointers, what are they pointing to in terms of my experience, and how can I relate these teachings to my experience? And then we start realizing what the ways of operating are here, learning to recognize right view compared with wrong view that might be there, or recognize qualities that the teachings point to, and being able to find them in here as well, and pay attention to them and develop them. So learning what is of value and what is it we try to let go of. And then the third level of wisdom is when we've brought this in and right view, kind of we make it our own, and then we can move into the silent part of awareness and learn to look at things in terms of Dhamma rather than in terms of self. And so I realized that a lot of that first level of intellectual, theoretical Dhamma exercises, ways of reflecting, ways of questioning things, ways of investigating that Luang Por teaches have really rubbed off on me. And I've made a lot of them my own, taken on the tools, tested them, found how they work for me, and then used them. And it's only once I started teaching myself that I realized that what was coming out of my mouth sounded very similar to his teaching. In a way, that was very, very gratifying, because I realized, okay, so something good is rubbing off. And I'm not just parroting what he says. I really try to take it on and put it to the test. But otherwise, another way that being around him has taught me a lot is just watching how he deals with things. From his response to getting his finger stuck in the door jamb, or busting his pinky toe against the piece of furniture and breaking it, or getting the nail pulled out of its bed, to meeting people that he likes and how he responds to looking forward, being with them, and then letting them go, or people that he doesn't necessarily like on a personal level, but nevertheless is willing to receive, speak to, and then how he relates to those. And that was one very beautiful lesson, to kind of realize he still has likes and dislikes. It's not because he's Luang Por Sumedho that he stops being a human being with preferences, likes and dislikes, desires, and stuff like that. But realizing he has them, he's aware of them, but that's not where he operates from. So when someone asks to see him, after a couple of years, we got close enough that he felt comfortable letting me know, oh no, not them. There would be and just that reaction would be a teaching to me, because if I had a reaction like that, I'd find myself judging myself or feeling guilty for having a reaction. And I realized that was me holding an ideal of how a monk should be and practice, and how a monk should feel. And Luang Por Sumedho has never done that. He's always taught, since years back, if you listen to the recordings of his teachings and read his books, he always reminds us we can't help the way we feel. And this was him showing me. So someone would ask to see him, I'd convey the message, and it's like, oh no, do I have to? You don't have to. Oh, it's up to you. And he says, okay, I'll see them. And then that in itself would be a lesson, to see that he has these feelings, acknowledges them, but then he steps past the feeling and does what is right, and goes to a place in his heart where he's not operating from preferences, desires, likes and dislikes. And then he'd be with a person talking Dhamma, and because he's stepped back from his personality, he's coming back to Dhamma, then when he relates to these people, he's completely open. And these people walk away from having met Luang Por with a heart absolutely chock-a-block full of light and happiness and joy, inspired. And they feel respected, they feel considered. And actually sometimes, most of the time, people who come up to him, whether they're already good people or whether they're people who are struggling, suffering, people that have characters that most people would find difficult to relate to, Luang Por has a way of always addressing, looking at and addressing and encouraging the best in them, which is Dhamma. So he always looks at Dhamma in their hearts. And they may have a personality, but he doesn't speak to the personality. He speaks from the Dhamma in him because he stepped back. There's a personality, but he steps back from it and operates free from this personality, and that's what he addresses in the other person. And he's never said that to me the way I just described it to you, but it's something I've noticed him doing, and I was like, oh my goodness, isn't that skillful? I'd like to be able to develop that skill as well. And so I've started paying attention to my reactions, to my likes and dislikes and preferences, and noticed how unquestioningly I used to follow them. And I've learned to pay attention to that and train myself to recognize it, not take it personally, not react through guilt or judgment, step back from it, and then come back in myself to a position as clearly as I can see, free from that, and then how to notice how that allows me to relate to people that I would otherwise probably try to avoid. So that's just one example of something I've learned from him, that just through watching him and living with him. So he's, yeah, sorry, just to finish this, realizing how incredibly human Luang Por Sumedho is. And I feel very fortunate to have been able to witness this close up, because it really, in terms of all the teachings that he has shared and all the reflections he's shared around the first three fetters, which are those that get in the way and prevent us from recognizing Dhamma, he really embodies the teachings. Whatever he says, you can see is backed up in his practice and how he behaves and relates to his personality or other people's personalities. It's very, very beautiful.
Those three fetters being personality view, doubt, and attachment to conditioning, attachment to rites and rituals.
That's how he likes to translate them, yeah. Attachment to conditioning. Yeah.
Tan Ajahn, this ability, that was beautiful. And this ability to step back from the personality and operate from a place of Dhamma. In terms of, and Luang Por Sumedho, these are such a key component of his teachings, as being the knowing, utilizing the sound of silence as an anchor, and maintaining citta viveka, seclusion of heart in the midst of maybe a lot of activity. What skillful means or advice would you give to listeners who operating in the midst of circumstance and job and a political environment that a lot of people find quite fraught right now? How should people maintain that place of Dharma in them and operate from that? Do you have any thoughts for how people can do that in their lives?
Yeah, the answer to that is the same as the answer to people in the monastery who say, how do I keep that going in the midst of activities in the monastery? It's just recognizing what it is that we're coming back to at any given moment. Whatever the circumstances are, our tendency is often to try to... We're so accustomed to project ourselves out into the world of events, political events, economics, and the family and the society and stuff like that. But we're also very accustomed to send our mind out in terms of the reactions that arise, the moods, the responses, and the emotions that we feel. And in terms of finding a home base, like Luang Por is describing Luang Por does, we all have personalities operating that are conditioned by our childhood, our years in school, in university, at work, whatever it is. So we all have a personality there as a condition to work with, and the ability to step back from that, recognizing what it is, and learning to come back to awareness. And that's what Luang Por is pointing to since he started teaching. And it's incredibly simple, but we find it complicated because of the complexity of sankharas and the habit of getting involved with them. So there's something that Luang Por does very beautifully, is like no matter what tips and tricks you ask him about the practice, he always comes back to awareness. And I think that through all the different tips and tricks that I've tried, techniques and stuff like that, at the end of the day, a technique only works if it's coming from awareness. If in awareness we understand that any technique whatsoever, the whole point of a technique is coming back to awareness and learning to stay with it. And the body is probably one of the best for most people, but then also just being able to stop right now and use this very simple reminder that Luang Por Sumedho himself got from Ajahn Buddhadasa and Ajahn Chah. It's like this. I find that incredibly useful. I can be agitated, I can be restless, I can have had too much coffee, and I have to plan a lot for Luang Por because we're going on a trip or some activity is coming up. And I can sometimes feel just really restless, and from a personality point of view, I want to get rid of that restlessness. I don't like it. It's not comfortable. And it doesn't fit with the image I'd like to have of myself as a monk, especially one who's been in robes for 21, 22 years now. It's kind of, in terms of personality, I don't want restlessness and confusion. But if I operate from a personality, I always get in trouble because I resist it, and I'm trying to force the situation to be different. Myself, events, other people, and I end up just feeling irritable and irritated. And if I remember, it's like this. I might not like the way it is. I might not want to be the way might not want things to be the way they are. I don't condone it, and yet they still are the way they are. Then what is a skillful way of responding to that? And by doing that, we're stepping back into a place where there is a personality, there is a reactivity. We're not denying it, but we're looking for somewhere else to operate from than personality. And that's always coming back to awareness.
Tan Ajahn, I know you've got actually Upaṭṭhāking duties coming up soon. But yeah, I was thinking that I would ask you about advice for the next generation. You know, we come to monasteries as convert Buddhists, and we've got a lot of ideals, and it's honestly a lot of selfishness, and this Upaṭṭhāking is a bit foreign. But I think the way you describe Upaṭṭhāking is it's beauty. It's beautiful. The way you do it, the way you model it is just, it's beautiful. So thank you for the example. And if you did have any final words of advice for the next generation who, of course, Luang Por Sumedho, Luang Por Pasanno are looked after so well, but I hope we can do it into the future. So if you had any words, or if this is enough to it's like this.
There's one thing that keeps coming up in the mind in terms of service. And in the Buddha's teaching, he teaches this gradual path of dana, sila, bhavana. And they call it a gradual path because there is no sudden penetration to nibbana where you go from nothing to the aha moment. It's a gradual path. And the Buddha describes it as dana, basically generosity or service. And generosity, sila, being using moral principles to guide our speech and action in life. And then bhavana, which is cultivation in the mind. And there's a reason this dana is this foundation. And when we are being generous, and in particular in the context of Upaṭṭhāking, we're giving service, attention, and care, kindness to someone else. But it's giving. And in this practice of giving to others, we are considering where it's coming from. So we're paying attention to qualities that we're cultivating in the heart. But the act of giving, the thoughts of giving, are always about paying attention to someone else. And there is a certain happiness in that, especially if the person we're giving to is someone that we love, care for, and respect and have affection for. It's very rewarding when people are grateful and thankful and appreciative. So that's one of the benefits of giving and of service. But I think there's one benefit that's even closer to home than that, and that is very much at the core of the whole practice, is the fact that when we're giving, offering something to someone else, we're paying attention, we're taking our attention away from self. And if we look at that, paying attention to self, to me, to what I want, to how I feel, you can even do it as an exercise. We usually end up feeling miserable. And then we pay attention to others. At the very least, we're taking attention away from this source of misery. So just in that, it is a source of happiness, let alone any benefits that come from connecting with wholesome, good people, wise people. So that is a practice that is valid at the beginning, at the middle, and takes us all the way to the end. So to pay attention to that aspect of it it helps people find benefit in it, find nourishing, and then it's easier to give ourselves to dana in whichever form that takes.
Tan Ajahn, thank you so much for taking the time and for just what you've given to the Sangha and to us, a lesson in humility. And I think the last time Luang Por Sumedho grew up in Seattle, and actually I think was the altar boy at the church where we meet every week when he's 11 years old. So the Dharma runs in circles, but it was wonderful the last time we had you all visit. I know with Luang Por's age, it may not happen again soon or something, but if you did come by, we'd love to see you. And I remember going to Bubblegum Alley, which is this alley in Seattle, just covered in bubblegum, and Luang Por Sumedho said, "This is gross."
I remember.
Accurate evaluation, so we won't take you there again, Tan Ajahn. Maybe.
No, I honestly doubt Luang Por will have the energy and the ability to do much more traveling, and if any, probably more kind of something closer to the UK. But if I have the opportunity, I'd be very glad to come and visit.
We'll even learn more than one massage move, and we can.
That's right.
Yeah,
Won't just be this. Yeah.
I've got this one. Okay. Thank you, Tan Ajahn.
Thank you, both of you.